Climate change. We've probably all heard something about it. But how much can any one of us really do about it? We'll answer that question on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. People hold different views when it comes to the subject of global warming. Does it exist? If it does, is it a natural phenomena? Or is it man-made? Regardless of the differing views held, even many scientists agree that the Earth's climate is changing. So what are some of the things that we can do as individuals to prepare and adapt to what some scientific experts are calling the unprecedented changes taking place in our Earth's atmosphere? Well, I have two guests with me who will discuss what their organization is doing to provide information about the impacts of climate change and the programs available to help us adjust to these impacts. On my left is Violet Saena. Violet is the Climate Resilient Communities Director at Actera, a nonprofit that brings people together to create local solutions for a healthy planet. She has served as an international climate change expert for over 10 years and has worked with various groups in a wide range of less developed countries to protect their communities from the impacts of climate change. Ariane Erickson is seated on my right. Ariane also works at Actera and currently serves as its Go EV manager in charge of Actera's new Carl Knapp Go EV program, which seeks to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in the Bay Area. Prior to her current position, she oversaw Actera's Business Environmental Awards programs from 2006 to 2015. Well, thank you so much. Welcome. It's just a delight having the two of you to talk about this important topic. Now, I was looking this afternoon on the NASA website and happened to come across their very interesting information that they had on the website. And we can see the website and one of their featured photos where they talk about the impact of climate change and just how much things have been changing. So we see that right now, if we could scroll a little bit more. So the website, starting on the left, talks about how centuries ago, what the atmospheric temperature was. And it never went above that line where the writing is, never until now. And you can see on the right how much things have changed radically. And if we could scroll down a little bit more on that, it talks about, if we could just let it sit right there, the impacts of climate change and how 97% of the scientists, 97% of climate experts. So what do you think about that? Well, we could lose the photo now. Yeah.
Sure. I trust science. And I trust the scientists. I am not a scientist, so I leave it up to the experts to study what is happening to the Earth's atmosphere and to use their knowledge base and expertise to inform me, to explain what is happening. Now, we can see what is happening. The Earth is warming. The glaciers are melting. That's a fact. We can see that happening. I am trusting them to have the expertise to explain why. And like you said, 97% of the world's scientists agree that it is caused by human behavior, specifically humans that are burning fossil fuels and adding carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Violet,
Yes.
your take.
Well, you know, I could say, I mean, I was born and raised in Samoa, growing up in the small, I mean, growing up in Samoa, it's a small island developing state. With what I can say is, you know, with my lived experience, growing up in a small island and, you know, faced with all the climate extremes, and this was more than a decade ago. And so I was living climate change then.
So tell me, they talk about sea level rise.
Yes.
Did you find, and I noticed you said Samoa, and some of us say Samoa, but you emphasized the first part, Samoa.
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 You're doing great, Henrietta.
Did you notice any sea rise levels? A rise in the sea levels around the island?
Well, yes. I mean, at that time, I started working in the climate change field right after college, 1998.
Why?
At that time, you know, funny, I was kind of like forced into the field. Right after I graduated, my background was on biodiversity. I was working out in an outer village, helping a village, trying to create a marine reserve. And I was called in to our main office because there were no people working on climate change, and climate change was very new. And Samoa signed and rectified the convention. And so we had obligations to report back to United Nations.
What convention?
The United Nations, yes, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, where most of the countries in the world have signed and rectified. So I became the first climate change officer for Samoa as a country. And my role was to meet Samoa's obligation to the UN. And that's through developing programs, reporting back to the United Nations of what's happening in Samoa. And that's how I started getting involved, carrying out vulnerability assessment studies to assess the vulnerability of Samoa to climate change and sea level rise.
Well, you'll have a lot to say to us
Yes,
as we
do.
talk. And since I asked Violet how she got involved, how did you get involved?
Well, it was about 13 years ago that I started working for Actera. I overseed Actera's Business Environmental Awards. So back then, I started seeing what local companies were doing in terms of their environmental leadership, and the word sustainability grew we just heard it more and more often. And included in sustainability was corporations talking about how they were measuring their greenhouse gas emissions, measuring their emissions, trying to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And Actera as a whole, during that time period, became more and more focused on this issue, which has just become really the largest environmental issue of our time. And Violet's nodding her head. I mean, I think you would agree that it's really the biggest moral issue of our time. And so
The administration doesn't think so.
they don't, but everybody else does.
So Violet, you talked about being responsible for carrying out some programs. What did you do in terms of working with other countries? You worked with Pacific Islander countries,
Yes.
and you also worked with some Caribbean countries.
Yeah. So my role was, you know, as a Samoan representative, actually most of my experience was through collaborations. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Paris Accord.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
there's actually the United Nations meeting is on right now in Madrid, I believe. So all the countries are there negotiating. So
And
I
it's
was
something
part,
that President Trump pulled out
Yes,
of.
yes. And so I was part of that. I was representing Samoa for more than 10 years at the negotiations. And so how I supported other countries is being part of the negotiating team, supporting small island developing states, supporting alliance of small island states.
Now, when you talk about supporting them how?
like working together with their countrymen representatives to come up with, with the plan how to negotiate. So at that time, we were talking about adaptation because islands like us, like Samoa and in the Caribbean, we were already impacted. It's not only sea level rise, it's climate extremes. Like, for example, my own lived experience, the first time I've experienced a cyclone or a hurricane was in 1990. That was the first time I've ever experienced a hurricane. The second one was 1991. The third one was 1994. Yeah, it started to become more frequent. And even the extremes, not only the frequency, the duration, the strength of all these extreme events really impacted us as Pacific Islanders or as islanders. And so like I was trying to say in the beginning, scientists confirm that climate change is happening. Small island states and other countries that are at the front line of climate change are experiencing that every day. And it's not just sea level rise, it's heat waves, it's the drought, it's all of those things. And so when we are at this table at the United Nations, we always fought for programs because there weren't any funding available for adaptation.
So programs like what? I mean, how do you prepare for heat waves and cyclones and tornadoes, hurricanes? I don't know about tornadoes.
Yeah. Yes. We don't have tornadoes in the
but
islands.
Hurricanes.
Yes, but hurricanes.
Yes. How do you? I mean, these are, not the richest countries in the world, and you can't just build, huge walls? As if that were even an option.
Yes. There's a lot of things that we focused on. It's not just one thing. I mean, for example, sorry for bringing, for a small country like Samoa, the economy is agriculture, tourism based. And so if a cyclone happens, all of that is destroyed. So our economy is destroyed. Families don't live in poshy or, solid homes. And
they're more thatched, are they?
Yes, most of it. And so when a cyclone hits, it's like the whole,
everything is blown away.
Everything is blown away. Yes, everything is blown away.
Now, is there high ground that people go to? Is there high ground? What, in the mountains or between the mountains?
We do have mountains, but the safest place is not up in the mountains. Well, usually people will go to churches because, we are Christian countries and the most solid buildings are the churches, and that's where a lot of people go to when they are going through
you remind me, I had a show with some Pacific Islanders, maybe it was a decade ago, and we were talking about the tragic effects of a cyclone or a hurricane in the islands. That has not been any of your experiences, has it? You've worked with countries primarily interested in measuring their emissions. Their emissions, what, of their car emissions or the buildings, or trying to have green buildings?
Yeah, so when I worked on the Business Environmental Awards, it was businesses that were trying to lower their emissions in whatever industry they worked in. So it could be internally, it could be through their production process for whatever they were producing. And that's where I really had hope that the corporate realm was really starting to take action and take responsibility. And so I realized, because this is such an important issue, Actera really needs to develop additional programs that helps move the needle and reduce carbon emissions. And what Actera is really the best at doing is grassroots mobilization and education of our residents and our communities and the business community as well. And so a few years ago, we decided to create the Carl Knapp Go EV program, because the transportation sector is a really, really big slice of the carbon emissions pie, so to speak. And that's what I currently do. It's my passion. And I can talk all about the benefits of electric vehicles, primarily because they are one of the key solutions to addressing climate change.
Well, you mentioned something in terms of Actera working with communities. And so since that's exactly what Violet does, before we talk about the EV programs that you work with, I'd like to talk about exactly what you're doing, because you are, and I'm looking at my notes, the Climate Resilient Communities Director. What is all of that?
Yeah,
what are we talking about? Resilient communities?
Yes,
How so?
It's building resiliency. You know, we talk about climate change. Climate change is already happening. So there's part of our program targets the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that can stop climate change. But the fact is, it's already happening, and it's impacting the lives of our community.
How so?
In many ways.
For example, you're working in
yes,
East Palo Alto.
I work in East Palo Alto and Belhaven of Menlo Park. Our programs include building community awareness and education on climate change and sea level rise. And we currently have a program that's funded by San Mateo County to conduct a community-based adaptation planning process. It's really about building community capacity. In the past years, we've been in East Palo Alto, and when we talk about climate change, a person like me and Ariane understand what climate change is, but to our community, they can't really connect the dots.
So it's interesting that you mentioned working in East Palo Alto, which is a low-income community, and it's said that it's the low-income communities that will feel the impact of climate change the most. Why is that?
Because of your capacity to adapt. So to explain it simply is, if I have resources, if I am well equipped, if I understand the issue and I'm prepared and I have resources, if something hits me, I'll be able to respond. I'll be able to rebuild. For our communities in East Palo Alto, many families don't have that. First thing, they don't understand what climate change is and how it affects them. What's happening now, how it's impacting their health, how it's impacting their water supply.
So are you saying people are ignorant? You said
No,
they don't
I'm not
understand.
saying that.
You know, if you're looking at the news and you're aware of what's going on around you and you've heard of climate change, it seems it's not that difficult. So what do you mean they don't understand?
Well, mind you, Henrietta, we're talking about a lot of our communities that I work with, that I serve, don't have access to a lot of information. Many families, they work 2 or 3 jobs just to make sure that they have the rent at the end of the month. So what we are doing in the community is really spending time with the community to talk about these issues. So for example, another health issue that comes up many times during my work is the mold. It impacts, there are a lot of families that have mold in their homes. Mold, yes, they have that in their home. And some, if we talk about the history of East Palo Alto and the flooding history, then we kind of like say, okay, this usually happens after a flood. Those are the impacts, those are the secondary impacts of flooding. And then how is the flooding happen? Then how can we connect that to climate change? So I'm not saying, again...
And East Palo Alto happens to be right by the bay anyway.
Yes, anyway.
So it would be very hard hit when it comes to sea level rise.
Yeah, that's why...
Now, mold, isn't that something, or would it be, that would affect residents in Samoa?
No.
Not as much?
Not
Why?
as much because of the climate, yes.
Ah,
yes, different climate, different climate, different living conditions. So the kind of homes we have does not create an environment for that to happen. But
so people have to prepare differently depending on where they live.
Depending on where you live, depending on what resources you have, depending on your community. So that's what we're trying to do in East Palo Alto with our work. We're organizing we're organizing, we're empowering the community to lead programs. And that's what we've done with our climate change community team that we've established since March of this year.
Okay, we can come back and talk more about the team. In terms of organizing and giving people information, you're heading this program in terms of EVs. And so tell us something about it and what you're doing in terms of sharing information and what type of information.
Sure. So the Carl Knapp Go EV program helps to educate people about the benefits of electric vehicles. We do that through holding workshops that people can come to and attend free of charge throughout the Bay Area. We hold ride and drive events that give people an opportunity to actually drive an electric vehicle. And what we like to say is once you've had that opportunity, you'll really understand just how much more fun EVs are to drive than a traditional car.
Why? I would think it depends on the tires, right? And the type of ride the car gives you.
Right. Well, so electric vehicles don't have an internal combustion engine, so they use an electric motor, and it's quiet. So first of all, you'll notice that the cabin, inside of the cabin, is very, very quiet.
The cabin.
Yeah,
The inside of the car is now called a cabin.
Well, I just called it a cabin. Secondly, because the torque is generated through electricity, it's instantaneous. There's no waiting for the combustion engine and the spark plugs and everything to do their thing in order to make the wheels power. It's electricity, so it's instantaneous. So the acceleration happens immediately as soon as you put your foot on the pedal. And people are always pleasantly surprised by that amount of quick power that they can get from 0 to 30. And the acceleration itself.
We used to see commercials from 0 to 60.
Yeah, 0 to 60. So 0 to 30 is where electric vehicles really outshine internal combustion engine vehicles. From 30 to 60, some of those internal combustion engine cars start to catch up. But they're making them faster and faster. So Tesla.
Who needs the speed?
Who needs the speed? The acceleration itself is just so smooth.
No. I have several questions for you.
Sure.
One, it's an advantage to hear a car coming, especially for people who can't see, and you're crossing the street.
Right.
So what can be done in terms of that?
Well, first of all, electric vehicles are not silent. People say they're silent and you can't hear them. You actually can hear them. They're just more quiet than traditional gas-powered cars. So if you have a lot of vehicles out on the road, but they're all electric, you can still hear them. It will just be quieter.
You mean there's a hum?
It's the sound of the wheels on the pavement. You can actually hear electric vehicles going by. They're just not loud. Some electric vehicles actually are specifically addressing people's concerns, and they are putting in mechanical sounds. So little small humming sounds when the vehicle is driving under 30 miles per hour, which is generally when they're near pedestrians.
I was playing around when I said the hum. They're all together humming, but that is kind of, a new feature? Just a little hum?
It's a little bit of a new feature, but also keep in mind that we have had Priuses for, 20 years. And at low speeds, they operate the same as one of these new 100% electric vehicles. And we have adapted to many Priuses being out there on the road near pedestrians.
I heard on the way here to the studio about an incident, and I don't know if you heard it, about firemen called to a building that had a car that was being let me see, what happens when you plug it in? It was getting a battery charge.
So it was getting charged?
Yeah, it was getting charged and something happened. And there was a smell.
Yeah. So,
which isn't something that we hear every day.
Sure.
About electric cars.
Exactly. I think it probably happens very rarely. But you have to know that any huge, powerful source of power is combustible. And in rare occasions, there can be combustion in very rare occasions, but so can there be for a gas-powered car, because they also have a very strong source of fuel which can ignite.
Yes,
and they do so
and
at a rate much, much, much greater than electric vehicles.
The other thing with the electric, because of the fires and the electric power being shut down and people not having power for several days, it might be very scary for people now when you talk about having an all-electric vehicle when the power is turned off.
Sure, I can address that.
Please do. That's why I mentioned it.
Well, first of all, if PG&E shuts off the power, you can't get gas either, because they run on electricity too. So you won't have.
When you say they run, what you're saying is the gasoline station.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So you will not be able to fill your tank with gas if PG&E turns off the electricity at that gas station. What's more, electric vehicles actually are developing the capacity, and very, very soon, they will be able to act as a power supply, where you can take the electricity from the battery inside your car and push it out to power your home. So if PG&E were to turn off your electricity...
Now, wait a moment. But then you are running down, depleting? Are you depleting the battery
you're absolutely using
energy,
the electricity.
Which means you can power your house.
Or your car.
And when you power your house, don't think that then you have a full charge on your car.
Yes, exactly. However, there's a solution to that, and I think it's really...
There is always a solution.
Well, and it's also, it helps in the fight against climate change, and so Violet can speak to this as well. But if you install solar on your home, this is a way of contributing to renewable energy and to contributing to a more localized, more stable grid, electricity grid. And it helps make you energy independent. So during the daytime when the sun is shining, you can draw in power from your own solar panels to use it to run your home. And then also a rather new technology is to have a battery power wall installed on your home that collects the excess electricity that you store in the battery that you can draw from at night.
Okay, Ariane has the answers, and I'll get to you. Because these are some of the things I would think maybe that you're sharing with the community in terms of options.
Yes.
So she mentioned solar.
Solar.
And she mentioned this power wall.
Power wall.
Okay, and other things that people can do?
Yeah, I mean, what our program offers in the community with regards to solar panels, we have several programs that low-income families can access free solar installations for their home at no cost to the homeowner. If the homeowner is qualified, if they have a good roof to have the solar power installed, and yeah, that's all about what they need to fulfill as the criteria for these programs. Now, these programs are funded by the climate investments organizations like Grid Alternatives. They manages this program, and Actera works closely with Grid Alternatives, Habitat for Humanity, Rebuilding Together to ensure that our families in East Palo Alto can access these services.
How do people find out about them?
We do a lot of community outreach and meetings, a lot of engagement, community meetings to allow families to sign up for these programs. But not only that, we do a lot of hand-holding services as well.
Hand-holding?
Yes.
You mean people have to have their hands held?
No, it means, like I mentioned before, like our families, for example, they are too busy working. And some of these programs required, like, have a lot of documentations that needs to be collected, fill in the application, and submit.
Now,
to
are
be
people
eligible.
worried? For example, I know there might be a lot of people who may not be properly documented. Have you come across concerns where people don't want to put down their names and they don't want to give personal information?
Yes.
And
It's all about building trust and maintaining trust with the community and the families we work with. And that we do have families, before we move on with their application, they would tell me, we have family members that are undocumented. And so it's my role, it's my responsibility to make sure that families are safe. And the same
how do you do that?
Well,
you go to President Trump, you go to ICE, you go to...
we protect them in the process. And we have, again, with all the organizations that we work closely with, we all have this bond and agreement on how to safeguard the families that we serve.
So, do you have any statistics or any numbers, for example, of how many people have taken advantage of the programs?
I don't have the exact numbers. I can give you numbers for this year.
Okay,
for this year,
that
in East Palo Alto, the goal was 15 families. 15 families were eligible. When we had funding for 15 families in East Palo Alto, we had funding for 15 families in Belhaven. And so that's for this year.
And that funding paid for what?
For the solar.
For solar
Yes,
on their roof?
On their roof. And then sometimes we come across families who are eligible for the solar, but then their roofs are too old. And that's when we reach out to our partner organizations like Habitat for Humanity or Rebuilding Together, if they have resources to support these families. So we've had families who come to us for solar, and then because of the roof, their project got delayed. And so we waited until after they get the roof fixed by Habitat or Rebuilding, and then they get the solar installed.
I mean, that's really quite a service.
It's incredible. And Violet, you had told us about the incredible savings that these families
I would think so.
get.
If you get your roof fixed and you also get solar.
Well, if you get solar, your electricity bill goes down to almost nothing. And it's a huge benefit to families. It's a benefit to the climate. It's a benefit to the community. It's a really, really wonderful program that I think families should take advantage of. And
how would they find out about it?
Again, we do a lot of community meetings and outreach
so
to the community.
So should somebody call Actera?
So, yes. So now, before when we started the program, I go out a lot. I go to the senior center. Millie Grant allows me to give a presentation.
Who is
there.
the executive director of the East Palo Alto
we go
Senior
to
Center.
Belhaven. Their community center, Menlo Park. We attend community events, tabling. But now people call me instead of me going out because we've served.
The word has gotten around.
The word has gotten around. And I've worked very closely with community leaders as well.
And we've also featured in the East Palo Alto Today newspaper some stories about residents who've gotten their roof fixed or they've had solar on the roof.
Yes.
And so
it's probably due to Violet's
yes,
work.
all of Violet's work. And while we still have some time, I want you to talk about the Go EV program and see the rebates or whatever people can.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we highlight when we give our workshops is that electric vehicles actually can help you save money over the lifetime of the ownership of the car. And that is because there are a lot of rebates and incentives that are out there on the table waiting for us to take advantage of.
I thought you were going to talk about no maintenance. You don't have to get oil. You don't have to buy gasoline. The cost of electricity might be low.
So the benefits of EVs are many. Listen, if you convert to an electric vehicle, if our whole community converted to electric vehicles, we wouldn't have smog, we wouldn't have air pollution, and all of the health effects that come from air pollution. We wouldn't have asthma, we wouldn't have as much lung cancer.
We might not have as much asthma.
Exactly.
Right?
So many health benefits to actually having widespread adoption of electric vehicles. But individuals will gain as well. And that is because over the lifetime of your vehicle, you will pay less money. The cost of ownership is lower if you own an electric vehicle than a traditional gas-powered car. And people will say...
And the payment's comparable? I mean, when you go to buy the vehicle.
Right, exactly. So people will look at the initial manufacturer's price and they'll say, but the electric vehicle is so much more expensive than the traditional car. And so they might be put off by that. However, if I can talk about some of these rebates.
Yes, and in fact, if we have a photo,
Sure.
a slide of rebates
Great,
that
fantastic.
we can go through once we can pull them up on the screen.
Well, can I start with the big one?
And we have it. And
Fantastic.
I'm wondering, I don't know that we could get it any larger.
I have it here
But
and I can...
okay,
great.
we can walk through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or run through it.
We'll speed through it. Okay. So,
Without, on electric power.
yeah, exactly. Which we have. All right. So the big one is a federal tax credit. And that isn't, so what happens is if you purchase a new electric vehicle this year, you will be able to take up to $7,500 off of your taxes next year in 2020. That's an up to $7,500 tax credit, which is the same, it's the equivalent of lowering the cost of that vehicle by that amount. It's an amazing benefit. So that drops the price.
Wait a moment. Does that mean if you have to pay that much in taxes? Suppose you pay only $300 in taxes.
So if you only pay $300, then you will get $300 back from your tax credit.
So
but they will not give you. They will not give you more money than you owe on your taxes. They will not. You will not get back more than your tax liability.
So you can get up to $7,500 as a rebate if up to however much taxes you have. Okay, that's the big one, the federal one. Okay.
So then California is very, very aggressively promoting electric vehicles. Really, California is a leader in so many of these climate initiatives. So with electric vehicles, they provide a $2,000 rebate, and you get that.
The state of California.
The state of California, and you get that whether you lease or purchase your car. After you have leased or purchased it, you go online and fill out a form. And then in about 3 weeks' time, generally speaking, you will get a check in the mail for $2,000.
That doesn't sound like a bad deal at all.
So then there's additional rebates that are available if you can income qualify. So if you are a low-income consumer, then the state of California will give you an additional $2,000. So your rebate check will be $4,000. It's fantastic. I can keep going.
So if you make, let us say you don't have any taxes to pay.
So the California state rebate is a check in the mail.
For $2,000.
For $2,000, or if you income qualify, it will be $4,000.
So I would, $4,000 in addition to the $2,000 from the federal government.
In addition to the $7,500 tax credit. So that's up to
So you mean one is making money?
We're saving money
that you can put towards the payment, your car payment.
Yes, exactly. So that drastically lowers the comparable price of an electric vehicle, but there's more incentives. So if you are
You mean there's more?
But wait, there's more.
Okay.
So,
I'll stop playing.
If you're a PG&E customer, and a lot of residents in our community are, you can apply for another rebate, and they will give you $800 for purchasing a new electric vehicle. And then additionally,
PG&E.
PG&E.
So how do you apply for that from PG&E?
Once again, you go online and you fill out a form, and a few weeks later, they will send you a check in the mail for $800.
You don't have to prove. Do you have to send?
Yes, they'll ask you for the vehicle's VIN number or
so
some proof that you have purchased the car.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then I know a lot of our viewers are actually customers of Peninsula Clean Energy, which is San Mateo County's clean energy provider. And Peninsula Clean Energy wants to incentivize people to drive electric vehicles. So they have 2 programs that offer additional rebates for people who want to purchase an electric vehicle. The first program is actually time limited. It lasts through the end of this year.
Yes.
So I'm glad we're having the opportunity to tell
we only
people
have
about
a
it.
few weeks left.
Exactly. So what they do is they have negotiated agreements with local dealers. There's specifically identified dealers in San Mateo County. Those dealers have agreed to give discounts to all San Mateo County residents through Peninsula Clean Energy. So for example, there's a dealership, well, don't quote me, but there is a dealership that is in San Mateo County where you can get a substantial discount on the new Nissan Leaf Plus, which is their latest iteration. It has a 226-mile range. It can get you where you want to go, 99% of where you want to go.
No. Oh, have we finished with the rebates?
Actually, there's an additional one that Peninsula Clean Energy is offering if you income qualify. So if you make less than 400% of the federal poverty level, then you can qualify for what's called their Drive Forward Electric program, and they will give you $4,000 towards the purchase of a used plug-in hybrid or a used 100% electric
So
vehicle.
it seems to me there's several programs right now that'll give you $4,000, and then there's that one that's $4,000, and then there's PG&E that's $800.
So a lot of these programs can stack on top
It
of one
seems
another.
like a money-making operation.
So what it does is it really makes the initial cost much more equal. But then where the electric vehicles have more benefit is in fueling them and also maintenance. Because as you were mentioning, it costs a lot less money to maintain an electric vehicle. There's just fewer moving pieces.
So, you know, I should admit that I've been sold. I was sold. You told me about a program, Clean Cars for All. Now, that's a state program.
That is a program that is offered by the Air District because they have a vested interest in cleaning our air, and it's an amazing program. Now, you qualify if you have a vehicle that is older and high polluting.
Now, what I should say is I never thought of my vehicle as high polluting, but I must say it is older. I purchased it in 1996, and I've been getting in the mail how I could get, the state will pay me to have it dismantled. And I've always ignored that because I liked my vehicle, and I didn't want to have to. It was paid for.
Yep.
However, I've applied for the program, and I'm awaiting my awards letter that I can take to the dealer to get my discount. And I'm going for a plug-in hybrid.
Fantastic.
Because I don't want to be totally dependent on electricity. And it's my understanding you can get gasoline, and the gasoline powers the electricity. So maybe one never has to get gasoline again.
Right. So a plug-in hybrid is a really good option for people that have long commutes or people who live in apartment complexes that don't have chargers installed in them, so that they can either charge at work or they can use a public charging station, but they have the fallback of having gasoline power when they need it. So I think it's a great choice.
Well, I am looking forward to seeing what rebates that can go towards my car. And I must say, I've liked my car. It's always gotten me home.
I can guarantee you when you go EV, you will never look back.
And I think my car is saying, it's time to retire. I am tired. I've been with you now for 22 years. It's time to let me go.
It's time. And Henrietta, I guess really the bottom line is you will enjoy the EV lifestyle. And your children...
There is an EV lifestyle.
There's an EV lifestyle. Your children and your grandchildren will thank you.
Well, that's very important.
It is.
To do what we can to save the planet. What more can we do, Violet?
Well, you know, there's a lot more. You know, our programs is supporting the community, helping your neighbors, creating an environment where people can learn about the issues, and also supporting, you know, it's not just climate change. climate change is one layer of problems because it's already happening with our community in East Palo Alto, working there on these issues. You know, what comes up all the time, it's housing, it's traffic, it's pollution, it's the gentrification, it's the water issues. Those are the issues that we need to deal with, because if we don't deal with that, our community, they'll be more vulnerable to all the other uncertainties that climate change and sea level rise will bring in the future.
Well, all communities right now, at least in the Bay Area, throughout the Bay Area, Northern California, even in Southern California, when you look at the levels of homelessness,
Yes.
have issues with housing, have issues with transportation.
Right. Transportation and housing is a statewide issue. And I just heard actually the District 13 California State Senate candidates talking about these issues recently. So another thing that I recommend that you do in order to address these issues is use your voting power.
Yes.
And these same candidates are actually going to be speaking at an event on January 15th. Actera is one of the co-sponsors. It's at Menlo Atherton High School, I believe. The sign-up link is through 350.org. And they're specifically going to be talking about their environmental policies and their environmental passion and how they're going to take that to action in Sacramento.
So Ariane just talks about people using their voting power, but then at the same time, they need to be informed.
They need to be informed. They need to be informed so that their voices can be heard, so that they can be at the table. I mean, that's one thing that we tried and encourage and empower our community. Last night, I was working with the Pacific Island community on climate change issues as well. And what I learned from the community last night about water issues is that some parts of East Palo Alto, they're paying for water, but they cannot use water for cooking or for drinking.
Why?
So they're paying because the water quality is bad. They see particles in their water supply.
Whose responsibility is that? That's water coming from?
I believe this was the water that comes from the well.
The well water.
The well water, yes, that part of East Palo Alto is.
Well, this isn't, East Palo Alto has put on the Gloria Way well, and some of the well water is mixed in with regular water, but then there are separate water companies.
Yes,
and so it's probably coming from several.
Yes.
So what can people do about that?
So, you know, what I said to them last night is, you know, they are concerned. They're spending money they don't have.
They're paying
for their water bill, and they're buying water for drinking and for cooking. I was like, you should be heard. You should start organizing. You should connect with organizations in East Palo Alto that are tackling these issues, like YUCA. YUCA's been working on
United for
Youth
Community
United for
Action.
Community Action. You should join YUCA. You should go to YUCA because there's already a platform. We don't have to recreate or.
And I know Nuestra Casa and
Nuestra
Community
Casa
Legal
Community,
Services of
all
East
of
Palo Alto.
Yes.
Were they convinced? Did they say they're going to, or did you have to hold their hands?
Well, they were surprised, and we had a few community leaders in the room, and it's like, okay, let's talk some more about this. How can we be heard? How can we relay because these are the families that have 2 to 3 jobs to make their ends meet. They don't have time to go to our city hall. They don't have time to go to our city offices and report this kind of.
But some things, when your life and your health depend on it, you have to somehow find the time or find somebody to represent you.
That's right.
To bring up the
So
issue.
if they have that information, if they know who to go to or where to go, I'm sure they will make an
Now,
effort.
I heard something about a survey that Actera has taken or is in the process of. Yeah, talk about that.
So as I mentioned, we've in March of this year, we built a climate change community team. The climate change community team was established. It's comprised of community leaders, comprised of church leaders. We even have city members that are part of the team, youth that are part of this team. And the team, their main goal is to organize, coordinate climate change work in East Palo Alto. And so when the team was established, the first thing they asked for was to carry out a climate change community survey, because we were talking about, again, we're talking about climate change, but the team didn't know how concerned is the community about climate change. Are they aware of climate change? So,
Or the impact.
or yes, are they aware of the impacts? Because they wanted that information, that baseline data that will help guide the team's work in the future. So that, because we were talking about responsibility, what is this team going to be responsible for? Are we going to educate the community? Are we going to advocate for climate change? Or are we going to take action on climate change?
Would you advocate for climate change, or you'd advocate for action around climate change?
Yes. Those were the questions that they wanted answers to. And so Actera immediately sought funding, because we needed funding to plan, to implement the survey. And we were fortunate.
What type of questions?
The questions were developed by the community. So we have a question. We had a question about, what is your understanding about climate change?
And
Are you concerned?
Was the survey taken door to door?
It was door to door. We even had an online platform for those who were able to do it online. We even had, later on during the survey period, we actually went to events to do the surveys there, because our door-to-door wasn't very successful. Again, we did it on Saturdays, and a lot of people weren't at home. We even did a training on how to do the survey, and the survey was conducted by community members from East Palo Alto. And so what we completed 311 surveys. Yes, we completed 311 surveys. And
about how many questions on the survey?
There were about 12.
Questions.
Yeah, 12, yes. But we also used the opportunity to provide information about climate change. And so we asked a question about their concern and their understanding. And then after we gave information about climate change and sea level rise, we again asked the same questions to see if there was any change.
When do you expect to have results?
We're actually giving a presentation next week.
You have the results?
On the 17th, the key findings.
Do you want to share any of that?
Well, one thing I like to share, one of the key findings, again, what the community wants is more education and more awareness on climate change.
So I'm thinking you can have programs, but those programs are so dependent upon funding.
Yes.
Are they?
They are.
And you can have the best program in the world, but unless you can get the funding for it,
yes,
you're finding that to be the case.
Yes, it's very difficult. We recently received support from Silicon Valley Community Foundation to continue our work and to start serving our community in No Fair Oaks.
Which is in Redwood City.
In Redwood City, yes, implementing similar program that we have in East Palo Alto. Currently, we have the support from San Mateo County that allowed us to carry out a community vulnerability assessment. I will have that as well. A report will be completed by the end of the year, and our plan is to present the findings to the city council as well as the city staff, and to report back to the community.
And maybe also consider the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors.
Yes. Supervisor Dave Pine, he's a key leader in all of the
Warren
work.
Slocum,
And
who
Warren Slocum
represents District 4 East Palo Alto. Surveys, funding in terms of Actera. Actera, in terms of its EV program, doesn't lack funding. I mean, does it? The EV program supported by the feds, by the state, by the county, by local dealers, by, yes.
Well, the Carl Knapp Go EV program has a very generous, is being very generously underwritten by an anonymous donor. But we also receive support from public agencies and cities that really are assertively, aggressively trying to move their residents towards electric vehicles. So for example, for the next 9 months, we've been given an opportunity by Peninsula Clean Energy to hold electric vehicle workshops in cities throughout San Mateo County. So we'll be holding workshops in the North Fair Oaks district of Redwood City early next year. We'll be holding a workshop in San Mateo, probably in Burlingame, Daly City, to get the word out.
Now, Actera is in Palo Alto.
Correct.
Which is Santa Clara County.
Correct.
Any programs for Santa Clara County?
We will most likely also be doing a workshop in the early part of the new year in Santa Clara County. And we also have our flagship Ride and Drive event that happens every September, and that happens right at our headquarters in Palo Alto. Also, we just confirmed that we will be holding a Ride and Drive event for the City of Palo Alto's annual Earth Day Festival and Great Race for Saving Water, which is April 25th. So you can come out to that event and take a free test drive in an electric vehicle.
And there is an event coming up
On the 17th
of December.
Yes.
Which is?
Next Tuesday. And this is a final, it's really a final meeting for everyone that were involved in the process of gathering data and information. And so what we're doing next week is presenting the results back to the community.
So after December 17th, we will have the results of the survey and any final words, anything you'd like to share in the 2 minutes that we have left. And I know you can fill the whole 2 minutes.
I know I can. So,
but you fill one and you'll fill the other.
So, you know, the staff and volunteers of Actera are passionately committed to addressing this major environmental challenge. And so I just recommend that if you are a concerned resident of this community, that you go to Actera's website, you get involved, you explore electric vehicles, you look to see all those organizations that Violet is working with to help people repair their roofs and get solar.
Violet?
My 1 minute, yes, few
Not
seconds.
quite a minute, sorry.
I just want to take this few seconds just to, I think what I wanted to say is to thank all the partners, not only our, other organizations, but especially the community leaders. The work on climate change in East Palo Alto has been led by the community and by the leaders, and they have done a great job guiding and guiding the path, and the work that we have ahead it's a great opportunity for the community.
Well, it seems that the work that we all have ahead is enormous, given climate change, and as I mentioned at the top, the unprecedented changes taking place in our Earth's atmosphere. And so I'm delighted that the two of you could be on just to share what's being done on a local level and what we can do individually. I'd like to thank the crew in addition to my guests, and I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time. So that is the show. Thank you. And
it's a wrap.
It's a wrap, although I don't hear any music.